The bridge of the massive warship Dominion's Edge hummed with quiet efficiency. Admiral Kexathera stood before the main display screen, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the stars drift past. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled 17 star systems for over 300 years, and Kexathera had personally overseen the conquest of 6 worlds. Today should have been another routine patrol along the Outer Rim territories. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Veltar from her station. "We're picking up an unusual signal." Kexathera turned his massive head toward the communication station. His species, the Zephyrians, stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and eyes that could see across multiple light spectrums. "Define unusual, officer." "It appears to be a distress signal, sir. But the mathematical patterns are primitive. Very primitive." Veltar's fingers danced across her console. "The translation matrix is having difficulty processing it. Put it through the main speakers." Static filled the bridge, followed by a series of numerical sequences and what sounded like basic mathematical formulas. Mixed within the patterns were repeated references to something called Terra and crude attempts at what might be peaceful greeting protocols. "Analysis?" Kexathera asked his science officer. Commander Zaxwell pulled up a holographic display. "The signal originates from an uncharted system approximately 4 light-years from our current position. Based on the transmission methods and mathematical complexity, I estimate this species achieved spaceflight recently, perhaps within the last 50 to 100 of their planetary cycles." Kexathera nodded slowly. The Empire had encountered dozens of such species over the centuries. Young civilizations that had just discovered faster-than-light travel often sent out primitive signals, hoping to make contact with other spacefaring races. Most were eager to join the Empire peacefully once they understood the benefits. Those that weren't could be convinced through other methods. "What can you tell me about their technology level?" the Admiral asked. "Rudimentary fusion drives, basic metal alloys in their ship construction, and their transmission equipment suggests they're still using electromagnetic spectrum communications rather than quantum entanglement networks." Zaxwell paused. "In short, Admiral, they're at least 2 centuries behind our current technology." "Perfect." Kexathera allowed himself a small smile. New worlds meant new resources, new labor forces, and new territories for the Empire. Young civilizations were often the most valuable. They had enough technology to be useful but lacked the military capacity to resist integration. "How many ships do you estimate they possess?" Zaxwell consulted his instruments again. "Based on similar species we've encountered at this development stage, I would estimate between 20 and 50 vessels. Likely small exploration craft and perhaps a few larger colony ships." The Admiral walked to his command chair and settled into it. "Officer Veltar, send a message to High Command. Inform them we've discovered a new spacefaring species. Request permission to initiate first contact protocols." "Yes, Admiral." Within 2 hours, the response came back from the Imperial capital. Permission granted. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet would be dispatched to make contact with these Terrans and evaluate them for Imperial integration. Kexathera had commanded the 3rd Fleet for 12 years. 15 massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying entire cities, formed the core of his force. Supporting vessels brought the total fleet size to nearly 30 ships, more than enough to handle any resistance from a primitive species. "Set course for the Terra system," he commanded. "Maximum speed." The journey took 3 days. During that time, Kexathera reviewed everything they knew about successful integration of young civilizations. The key was to demonstrate overwhelming force while offering generous terms. Most species, when faced with the choice between destruction and joining the most powerful empire in the galaxy, chose wisely. As they approached the edge of the solar system, long-range sensors began picking up more detailed readings of the target system. "Admiral," Science Officer Zaxwell called out, "I'm detecting an unusual amount of metallic debris in orbit around the 3rd planet." "Debris?" "Yes, sir. Large concentrations of refined metals. It could be the remains of failed space stations or perhaps asteroid mining operations." Kexathera nodded. Many young species went through a phase of aggressive space construction as they learned to work in zero gravity. Failed projects and space accidents often left debris fields around their home worlds. "Any signs of active vessels?" "Difficult to determine, Admiral. The debris is interfering with our sensors. I'm reading multiple metallic signatures, but they could be inactive hulks or space junk. No matter. We'll have a clearer picture once we drop out of hyperspace in the inner system. The Admiral spent the final hours before arrival reviewing standard first contact procedures. The Empire had refined these protocols over centuries of expansion. The key elements were simple: arrive in force, demonstrate superior technology, offer generous terms for peaceful integration, and be prepared to use force if necessary. Admiral, Navigation Officer Krendall announced, "We're approaching the dropout point. All ships prepare to exit hyperspace. Battle stations, but do not power weapons. We want to appear strong but not immediately threatening." The familiar sensation of dropping out of faster-than-light travel washed over the bridge crew. Stars shifted back into their normal positions as the fleet returned to normal space at the edge of the Terra system. "Full sensor sweep," Kexthera ordered. "I want to know everything about this system." The main display filled with data as the ship's powerful sensors reached out across space. The system contained a single star with multiple planets. The third planet showed clear signs of a technological civilization: artificial lights visible on the night side, orbital structures and electromagnetic emissions consistent with a spacefaring species. "Admiral," Zaxwell said, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "The metallic signatures around the third planet, they're more extensive than we initially thought." "How extensive?" "I'm reading thousands of individual contacts." "But that can't be right. The sensors must be malfunctioning or picking up interference from the star's magnetic field." Kexthera frowned. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array." While the sensors were being checked, Communications Officer Veltar spoke up. "Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission from the inner system." On screen, a voice filled the bridge, speaking in what the translation matrix identified as the dominant language of the third planet. "Unknown vessels, this is Terra Control. Welcome to our solar system. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The voice was calm, polite, and showed no signs of fear or panic. Kexthera found this mildly interesting. Most primitive species became extremely agitated when confronted with unknown alien vessels. "Open a channel," the Admiral commanded. "Unknown vessels of Terra, this is Admiral Kexthera of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. We come in response to your distress signals." "Distress signals?" The voice on the other end seemed puzzled. "Admiral, I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding. We haven't sent any distress signals." Kexthera exchanged glances with his communications officer, the mathematical transmissions requesting peaceful contact. "Oh, those." The voice seemed amused. "Those weren't distress signals, Admiral. Those were basic greeting protocols we send to any unknown vessels approaching our system. We call them welcome messages." The Admiral felt a small chill run down his spine. If these Terrans had protocols for greeting unknown vessels, it implied they expected such visits. That suggested either extensive contact with other species or— "Sensor diagnostics complete, Admiral," Zaxwell reported. "All systems functioning normally." "And the metallic contacts around the third planet?" Zaxwell's voice was quiet. "Still reading thousands of individual signatures, sir. The computer estimates somewhere between 15 and 20,000 distinct metallic objects in various orbital patterns around their world." Admiral Kexthera stared at the sensor readings for a long moment. 20,000 metallic objects seemed impossible for such a young civilization. He had conquered species that were centuries more advanced than these Terrans appeared to be, and none of them had possessed such extensive space infrastructure. "Could these readings be natural phenomena?" he asked his science officer. "Metallic asteroids or unusual mineral formations?" Commander Zaxwell shook his head. "Negative, Admiral. The objects are clearly artificial. They're in organized orbital patterns, and many are showing signs of active power generation and propulsion systems." The Admiral felt his confidence waver slightly, but he pushed the feeling aside. The Empire had faced overwhelming numbers before. During the Kepler Rebellion, they had defeated a coalition of 12 worlds. Numbers meant little against superior technology and battle experience. "Open a channel to the Terrans," he commanded. The same calm voice responded immediately. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. How can we help you, Admiral Kexthera?" "Admiral Chen, I am here to inform you that your system has entered the sphere of influence of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. As is our custom, we offer your species the opportunity to join our empire peacefully. You would become valued members of our civilization, with full protection and access to advanced imperial technology." There was a pause before Admiral Chen responded. "That's very generous of you, Admiral. However, I'm afraid we'll have to decline your offer. Earth has its own government and prefers to remain independent. Kexathera had expected this response. Most primitive species initially refused the Empire's generous offer. They didn't understand the benefits of membership or the consequences of refusal. Admiral Chen, I don't think you fully understand the situation. The Zephyrian Empire controls 17 star systems and possesses the most advanced military force in this region of the galaxy. We are offering you a peaceful path to join our civilization. I strongly encourage you to reconsider. I appreciate your concern, Admiral Kexathera, but our answer remains the same. Earth will remain independent, the Admiral sighed. He had hoped these Terrans would be more reasonable than the last species he had encountered. Very well, Admiral Chen. Imperial protocol requires that I give you one final opportunity to reconsider. I propose we meet in person to discuss this matter further. Perhaps a face-to-face conversation will help you understand the benefits of Imperial membership. I think that's an excellent idea, Chen replied. I propose we meet at coordinates I'm transmitting now. It's roughly halfway between our current positions. Kexathera looked at his navigation officer, who nodded confirmation. Acceptable. I'll bring my flagship and escort vessels. You may bring whatever diplomatic ship you prefer. Thank you, Admiral. I'll see you there in 2 hours. The Admiral turned to his tactical officer. Commander Draktos, prepare the fleet for the meeting. Full battle formation. All weapons powered but not targeted. I want these Terrans to understand exactly what they're facing. Yes, Admiral. All 15 dreadnoughts. All 15. And maintain active sensor sweeps. I want to know the moment any Terran vessels move toward our position. The fleet moved through space in perfect formation. Each dreadnought was a kilometer long and armed with enough firepower to level continents. The sight of 15 such vessels had convinced countless species to join the Empire peacefully. Kexathera was confident it would have the same effect on the Terrans. As they approached the meeting coordinates, the fleet's sensors detected a single approaching vessel. It was small, perhaps 200 meters in length, and showed no weapon signatures. Admiral, Communications Officer Veltar announced, the Terran diplomatic vessel is requesting permission to approach. Granted. Maintain defensive positions. The small Terran ship settled into position directly in front of the Imperial formation. On the main screen, Kexathera could see it was a sleek, elegant design, clearly built for speed rather than warfare. Admiral Chen, Kexathera said over the communication channel, I trust you can see my fleet clearly. Very impressive ships, Admiral. Your Empire certainly knows how to build warships. Kexathera was pleased by the compliment, but something in Chen's tone bothered him. The human Admiral didn't sound intimidated. If anything, he sounded politely interested. Each of these dreadnoughts carries enough firepower to destroy your entire planet. Admiral Chen, I hope this helps you understand the futility of resistance. I can see they're very powerful ships, Chen replied. However, I'm afraid Earth's position hasn't changed. We appreciate your offer, but we must decline. The Admiral's patience was beginning to wear thin. Admiral Chen, you seem to be under the impression that you have a choice in this matter. Let me be perfectly clear. You can join the Empire peacefully, or we will take your world by force. Those are your only options. I understand your position, Admiral Kexathera. Before we continue this discussion, would you mind if I conducted a small demonstration? I think it might help clarify the situation. Kexathera frowned. What kind of demonstration could a primitive species possibly conduct that would be relevant to this situation? What did you have in mind? Nothing dramatic. Just a small display of Earth's defensive capabilities. Against his better judgment, the Admiral found himself curious about what these Terrans might try. Very well, but I warn you, any hostile action against my fleet will result in the immediate destruction of your vessel and your homeworld. Of course, Admiral, I wouldn't dream of taking hostile action. This is purely for informational purposes. Admiral Chen's voice carried a tone of amusement that Kexathera found increasingly irritating. Proceed with your demonstration. Thank you. All Terran vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Commence demonstration protocol 7. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the fleet sensor operator called out in alarm. Admiral. New contacts. Multiple new contacts. Kexathera spun toward the tactical display and felt his blood run cold. The empty space around his fleet was suddenly filled with red dots representing unknown vessels. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Where did they come from? He demanded. Unknown, sir. They just appeared. No FTL signatures, no approach vectors. They just materialized around us. The Admiral stared at the display as more and more contacts appeared. The red dots formed perfect three-dimensional formations around his fleet, surrounding the Imperial ships from every angle. "How many?" he asked quietly. The sensor operator's voice shook slightly. "Still counting, Admiral. Current estimate is over 5,000 vessels and climbing." Kexathera looked at the main screen where Admiral Chen's small diplomatic ship floated peacefully in front of his fleet. The human vessel looked tiny and insignificant compared to the Imperial dreadnoughts, but now it was backed by thousands of its companions. "Admiral Chen," Kexathera said carefully, "what exactly are we looking at?" "Just a small portion of Earth's home defense fleet, Admiral Kexathera. I wanted to make sure you had all the relevant information before making any final decisions about our independence." The sensor operator called out again. "Admiral!" Contact count now exceeding 10,000 vessels. Admiral Chen's voice remained calm and friendly. "I should mention, Admiral, that this represents roughly 1/3 of the ships currently in this solar system. The other formations are maintaining their positions around Earth and Mars." Kexathera stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. His 15 dreadnoughts, which had seemed so powerful just minutes ago, now looked like minnows swimming in an ocean of sharks. "Admiral Chen," he said slowly, "perhaps we should discuss this situation further." "I think that would be wise, Admiral Kexathera. I think that would be very wise indeed." The bridge of the Dominion's edge had fallen silent, except for the steady beeping of sensors trying to count an impossible number of contacts. Admiral Kexathera stood frozen before the tactical display, watching red dots multiply around his fleet like stars appearing at nightfall. "Final count, sir," the sensor operator reported, his voice barely above a whisper. 27,416 individual vessels. Kexathera felt his legs grow weak. In over 30 years of military service, he had never faced odds like this. The largest fleet action in Imperial history had involved less than 3,000 ships total on both sides. "Sir," Commander Draktos, his tactical officer, looked to him for orders. Should we raise shields and power weapons?" The Admiral almost laughed. What would be the point? Even if every shot from his 15 dreadnoughts found its target, they would barely dent the Terran formation before being overwhelmed completely. "Admiral Kexathera?" Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "Are you still there?" "Yes," Kexathera managed to say. "I'm here. I hope you don't mind the demonstration. I wanted to make sure you understood Earth's position clearly. I notice your sensor operators seem to be having trouble getting an accurate count. Would it help if I organized the fleet into more visible formations?" Before the Admiral could respond, the massive cloud of Terran vessels began moving. The thousands of ships flowed like water, forming into perfectly organized geometric patterns. Spheres, cubes, and pyramids of warships arranged themselves around the Imperial fleet with mathematical precision. "Better?" Chen asked pleasantly. Kexathera stared at the display. The formations were beautiful and terrifying. Each geometric shape contained thousands of vessels, and they had organized themselves in less than 5 minutes. The level of coordination required was beyond anything the Empire had ever achieved. "How?" was all he could manage to say. "Quantum entanglement communication networks," Chen explained, as if discussing the weather. "Each ship is in constant real-time communication with every other ship in the fleet. We've been using the technology for about, 70 years now, I think, 70 years. The Empire's best scientists had been working on quantum communication for decades and had only achieved limited success with small networks. These humans had been using it for fleet coordination longer than most Zephyrians lived. Admiral Kexathera, I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed. I should explain that this is just our local system defense fleet. We maintain similar formations around each of our major colonies." "Colonies?" Kexathera's voice cracked slightly. "Oh yes, we have settlements in about 43 star systems now. Nothing on the scale of your impressive empire, of course. We tend to move slowly and carefully when it comes to expansion. 43 systems. The Terrans had nearly 3 times as many colonies as the mighty Zephyrian Empire, and their ships appeared to be far more advanced than anything in the Imperial fleet." "Admiral Chen," Kexathera said carefully, "how long has your species been spacefaring?" "Well, that depends on how you define spacefaring. We achieved our first faster-than-light travel about 250 years ago, but we've been active in our local solar system for much longer than that. 250 years. The Empire had made first contact with the Zephyrians' homeworld 260 years ago, and had spent the following decades conquering their neighbors. While the Empire was busy with local wars, humanity had quietly spread across dozens of star systems. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here, Admiral Chen continued. When we detected your Empire's expansion in this region of the galaxy, we assumed you would eventually make contact with us. We've been monitoring your activities for approximately 40 years. Monitoring us? Standard procedure when a new spacefaring civilization enters our area of space. We like to understand our neighbors before making formal contact. Your Empire's expansion methods are quite fascinating from an anthropological perspective. Kexathara felt a chill run through his entire body. The Terrans had been watching the Empire for 40 years. They knew about every conquest, every battle, every tactical doctrine the Imperial fleet used. Meanwhile, the Empire had never suspected that humanity even existed. Admiral, his communications officer whispered, I'm receiving multiple priority messages from our outlying patrol ships. What kind of messages? Sir, they're reporting Terran vessels at the edge of all our major systems. The ships aren't taking any hostile action, but they're everywhere. Admiral Chen's voice came over the speakers again. I apologize for any concern our exploration fleets might be causing your patrol ships. We've been curious about your Empire's infrastructure for some time. Impressive engineering work, by the way. Your orbital defense platforms show remarkable efficiency. The Admiral sank into his command chair. The humans hadn't just been watching the Empire expand. They had been studying Imperial technology and defenses across all 17 systems. They probably knew more about Zephyrian military capabilities than the Imperial High Command did. Admiral Kexathara, I hope you don't think we've been rude in our surveillance activities. We've been very careful not to interfere with your operations or make contact with your subject species. We believe in allowing civilizations to develop at their own pace. Subject species, Kexathara repeated numbly. Yes, the various worlds your Empire has integrated. We've been observing their adaptation to Imperial culture. It's quite interesting how different species respond to centralized authority. The Admiral realized that humanity had been treating the mighty Zephyrian Empire like a research project. They had watched from the shadows as the Empire conquered world after world, studying Zephyrian expansion methods like scientists observing insects. Admiral Chen, he said finally, what do you want from us? Want? Nothing at all, Admiral. We're quite content with our current territory and have no territorial ambitions in your region of space. We were simply curious about your Empire's structure and methods. But you could destroy us, Kexathara stated more than asked. I suppose we could. But why would we want to do that? Your Empire represents a stable form of government that provides order and security to 17 star systems. Destroying that would cause tremendous suffering for billions of people. The Admiral looked at his tactical display again. The Terran formations had spread out even further, creating a three-dimensional web of ships that stretched beyond his sensor's maximum range. 27,000 vessels, and Chen had said this was only 1/3 of the ships in this system alone. Besides, Chen continued, we've found that every civilization has something valuable to contribute. Your Empire's administrative efficiency is quite remarkable. We could probably learn a lot from your bureaucratic systems. You want to learn from us? Of course. Your Empire has successfully managed multiple species across 17 star systems for centuries. That requires incredible organizational skills. We've never attempted anything on that scale. For the first time in his adult life, Admiral Kexathara didn't know what to say. He had come to this system expecting to intimidate a primitive species into submission. Instead, he found himself surrounded by a civilization so advanced that they viewed the Empire as an interesting case study in governmental administration. Admiral Chen, he said slowly, I think I need to contact my superiors. Of course, Admiral. Take all the time you need. My fleet will maintain position until you're ready to continue our discussion. Kexathara looked around his bridge at the stunned faces of his crew. They had all heard the conversation. They all understood that everything they thought they knew about the galaxy had just changed forever. Open a channel to High Command, he ordered quietly. Priority Alpha. I need to speak with the Emperor himself. This was going to be a very difficult conversation. The communication to Imperial High Command took 6 hours to establish. 6 hours during which Admiral Kexathara sat in his command chair, staring at a tactical display filled with more enemy ships than existed in the entire Imperial Navy. The Terran vessels maintained perfect formations around his fleet, neither advancing nor retreating, simply waiting with infinite patience. Admiral, his medical officer approached quietly. Several crew members are showing signs of extreme stress. Should I distribute sedatives? Kexthera looked around the bridge. His officers were pale and jittery, jumping at every sound. The magnitude of their situation was slowly sinking in, and it wasn't pleasant. Do what you think is necessary, Doctor. Admiral Chen's voice suddenly filled the bridge again. Admiral Kexthera, I hope you don't mind the interruption. Our medical sensors are detecting elevated stress levels among your crew. Would you like us to provide medical assistance? The Admiral stared at the speakers in disbelief. Your medical sensors? Standard equipment on all our diplomatic vessels. We find it helpful to monitor the health of visiting dignitaries. Stress can sometimes interfere with productive negotiations. You can scan my crew from your ship? Oh yes, our sensors are quite advanced. We can monitor individual biometric readings from several thousand kilometers away. Actually, I'm a bit concerned about your science officer. His cardiac rhythm seems irregular. Perhaps he should see a physician? Commander Zaxwell looked up from his station in alarm. Admiral, I haven't told anyone about my heart condition. How could they possibly know? Kexthera felt another piece of his confidence crumble away. The Terrans could monitor individual crew members' health from across space. What else could their sensors detect? Admiral Chen, exactly how advanced are your scanning capabilities? Quite comprehensive, I'm afraid. We can monitor biological functions, analyze ship systems, track energy signatures, and examine structural integrity from considerable distances. It's necessary for ensuring the safety of diplomatic meetings. The Admiral realized that the humans probably knew more about his ship's capabilities and weaknesses than he did. They had been scanning the Imperial fleet constantly since the first moment of contact. Sir, Communications Officer Veltar spoke up. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Imperial capital. Put it through. Private channel. Emperor Thaklon's image appeared on a secondary display. The supreme ruler of the Zephyrian Empire looked annoyed at being disturbed. Admiral Kexthera, this had better be important. I was in the middle of a state dinner. Your Majesty, I'm afraid we have encountered an unprecedented situation. Kexthera spent 20 minutes explaining the encounter with humanity, the massive fleet surrounding his ships, and the revelation that the Terrans had been observing the Empire for decades. With each detail, Emperor Thaklon's expression grew more grim. 27,000 ships? The Emperor said finally. Yes, Your Majesty. And Admiral Chen indicated this is only a fraction of their total forces. Are you certain these readings are accurate? I've had my officers run diagnostics on all sensor systems multiple times. The readings are correct. Emperor Thaklon was silent for a long moment. Admiral, what is your assessment of this species' military capabilities? Your Majesty, in my professional opinion, they could destroy the entire Imperial Navy without significant losses. Their technology appears to be centuries ahead of ours, and their intentions? Unknown, Your Majesty. They claim to have no territorial ambitions in our region of space. They say they're merely curious about our governmental systems. The Emperor's laugh was bitter. Curious. They've been watching us like laboratory specimens. Yes, Your Majesty. Admiral, I want you to return to Imperial space immediately. Do not engage these Terrans under any circumstances. We need time to analyze this situation. Understood, Your Majesty. Should I attempt to negotiate some kind of agreement with them? Just get out of there alive, Admiral. We'll worry about diplomacy later. The connection ended, leaving Kexthera alone with his impossible situation. He opened a channel to Admiral Chen. Admiral Chen, I've been ordered to return to Imperial space. Will your fleet allow us to withdraw? Of course, Admiral Kexthera. We have no desire to detain you. However, before you leave, I'd like to make a proposal. What kind of proposal? Well, as I mentioned, we're very interested in your Empire's administrative methods. We'd like to establish a cultural exchange program. Kexthera blinked in confusion. A what? Cultural exchange. We could send some of our sociologists and political scientists to study your governmental systems, while you could send some of your people to observe our colonies. I think both our civilizations could learn a great deal from each other. The Admiral found himself speechless. The humans, who could easily conquer the entire empire, were offering to trade knowledge instead of demanding surrender. Admiral Chen, why would you want to learn from us? Your technology is clearly far superior to ours. Technology isn't everything, Admiral Kexithara. Your empire has achieved something we've never attempted. The successful integration and management of multiple alien species across dozens of worlds. That requires incredible diplomatic and administrative skills. But we conquered those species by force. Initially, yes, but you've managed to create a stable, functioning multi-species civilization that has lasted for centuries. That's remarkable. We've been very careful to expand slowly, establishing colonies only on uninhabited worlds. We've never faced the challenges of governing alien populations. Kexithara realized that Admiral Chen was being completely sincere. Despite their overwhelming technological superiority, the humans genuinely believed they could learn something valuable from the Empire. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered, the Terran formations are beginning to move. The Admiral looked at his display and watched in fascination as the massive fleet began to reorganize itself. Instead of the threatening formations that had surrounded his ships, the Terran vessels were forming ceremonial lines, creating a clear corridor leading away from the system. Admiral Kexithara, Chen's voice carried a note of warmth, we're opening a departure lane for your fleet. You're free to leave whenever you're ready. And your cultural exchange proposal? Think about it, Admiral. There's no rush. If your empire decides it's interested in learning more about humanity, we'll be here. We're very patient people. Kexithara looked at the tactical display one final time. 27,000 alien warships had formed an honor guard for his departure. Ships that could have destroyed his entire fleet in minutes were instead showing him the respect typically reserved for visiting dignitaries. Admiral Chen, he said slowly, I'll convey your proposal to the Imperial government. Thank you, Admiral. I hope we'll have the opportunity to speak again under more pleasant circumstances. Safe travels. As the Imperial fleet began moving toward the departure corridor, Kexithara couldn't help but notice that the Terran ships maintained perfect spacing and alignment, creating a pathway that was both beautiful and intimidating. Admiral, his navigation officer reported, we're clear of the Terran formations. Set course for home. Maximum speed. As the stars stretched into lines and his fleet entered hyperspace, Admiral Kexithara sat back in his command chair and tried to process what had just happened. He had come to this system as a conqueror and was leaving as a student. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, which had dominated this region of the galaxy for centuries, had just discovered they were children playing in a sandbox while adults watched from nearby. The most disturbing part wasn't humanity's overwhelming military superiority. It was their politeness. They had treated the Imperial fleet with courtesy and respect, even while demonstrating the ability to destroy them utterly. That kind of restraint suggested a level of maturity and wisdom that the Empire had never achieved. For the first time in his life, Admiral Kexithara began to wonder if there might be better ways to run a galactic civilization than conquest and domination. And that thought frightened him more than 27,000 warships ever could. The return journey to the Imperial capital took 4 days. 4 days during which Admiral Kexithara barely slept, barely ate, and spent most of his time staring at star charts and trying to understand how everything he thought he knew about the galaxy had been wrong. His crew moved quietly around the bridge, speaking in whispers. The encounter with humanity had shaken everyone aboard the Dominion's edge. They had left Imperial space as conquerors, and were returning as messengers bearing news that would change everything. Admiral, Communications Officer Veltar announced, we're receiving a message from the Imperial capital. We're ordered to dock at the High Command facility immediately upon arrival. Kexithara nodded. He had expected this. The Emperor would want a full debriefing as soon as possible. When they finally arrived at the Imperial homeworld, Kexithara found himself standing before a council of the Empire's highest military and civilian leaders. Emperor Thakalon sat at the head of a massive table, his expression grave. Admiral, the Emperor began, I want you to tell this council everything. Leave out no detail. For 2 hours, Kexithara described the encounter with humanity. He explained the massive fleet, the advanced technology, the revelation that humans had been observing the Empire for decades. The council listened in stunned silence. You're certain about the ship count? Asked Grand Admiral Zekmor, the Empire's highest military commander. 27,416 vessels. My sensor operators counted them 3 times. And this Admiral Chen claimed this was only 1/3 of their forces in that system? Yes, Grand Admiral. He mentioned similar formations around their other worlds. Supreme Counselor Vexara, the Emperor's chief advisor, leaned forward. Admiral, in your opinion, could we defeat them in open warfare? Kexthara chose his words carefully. Counselor, in my professional judgment, humanity could destroy the entire Imperial Navy without sustaining significant casualties. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours, their fleet size is overwhelming, and they've had decades to study our tactics and weaknesses. A heavy silence fell over the council chamber. What about their intentions? The Emperor asked. Do you believe they plan to attack us? No, Your Majesty. If they wanted to destroy the Empire, they could have done so years ago. They seem genuinely interested in peaceful coexistence. And this cultural exchange proposal? Kexathera straightened in his chair. Your Majesty, I believe Admiral Chen was sincere. The humans appear to think they can learn something valuable from our governmental systems. Learn what exactly? How to manage multiple alien species within a single civilization. They mentioned that their expansion has been limited to uninhabited worlds. They've never faced the challenges of governing alien populations. Grand Admiral Zekmor snorted. They want to learn our conquest methods, so they can become conquerors themselves. I don't think so, Grand Admiral. They seemed more interested in our administrative systems, how we maintain order across multiple species, how we handle cultural differences, how we prevent conflicts between different alien populations. Emperor Thaklan was quiet for a long moment. Admiral Kexthera, what is your personal recommendation? The Admiral had been dreading this question. His answer would sound like treason to many in this room. Your Majesty, I recommend we accept their cultural exchange proposal. Several counselors gasped. Grand Admiral Zekmor stood up angrily. Admiral, have you lost your mind? These aliens could be planning to infiltrate our government. With respect, Grand Admiral, if they wanted to infiltrate our government, they could simply conquer us and install their own administrators. They don't need our permission to study our systems. Then why haven't they conquered us? Demanded Supreme Counselor Vexara. Kexthara took a deep breath. Because they don't want to, Counselor. They seem to believe that every civilization has something valuable to contribute. They view conquest as wasteful and destructive. That's impossible, Zekmor declared. No species becomes that powerful without aggressive expansion. Apparently some do, Grand Admiral. Emperor Thaklan raised a hand for silence. Admiral, explain your reasoning for accepting their proposal. Your Majesty, we have 3 options. First, we can attempt to fight them. This would result in the complete destruction of the Empire and the deaths of billions of our citizens. Second, we can ignore them and hope they continue to ignore us. This leaves us vulnerable to other threats while learning nothing about their capabilities or intentions. Third, we can accept their offer and try to learn from them. Learn what? How they built such an advanced civilization without conquest. How they managed to expand peacefully. How they developed technology centuries ahead of ours. Your Majesty, if we could learn even a fraction of their methods, the Empire could become far more powerful than it is today. The Emperor was silent for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. Admiral, you mentioned that they've been observing our subject worlds. What did they think of our governance methods? They seemed impressed by our ability to maintain stability across multiple species. Admiral Chen specifically mentioned our administrative efficiency. Did they criticize our expansion methods? Kexathara hesitated. Not directly, Your Majesty, but I got the impression that they find conquest to be an inefficient means of expansion. Inefficient how? Well, Your Majesty, conquest requires enormous military resources, destroys infrastructure, and creates resentful populations that require constant monitoring. Peaceful expansion to uninhabited worlds avoids all those problems. Supreme Counselor Vexara leaned back in her chair. But uninhabited worlds don't provide workers or soldiers. No, Counselor, but they also don't require soldiers to control them. And apparently, humans have developed automation technology that reduces their need for manual labor. The Council spent another hour debating the situation. Finally, Emperor Thaklan called for a vote on whether to accept the human cultural exchange proposal. The decision was close. 7 votes in favor, 5 against. Admiral Kexathera, the Emperor announced. You will return to human space as our official ambassador. Your mission is to learn everything you can about their civilization, while sharing selected information about ours. Yes, Your Majesty. And Admiral, Try not to let them learn anything that could be used against us. Kexithera almost smiled at that. The humans already knew more about the Empire than most Imperial citizens did. I'll be careful, Your Majesty. 3 weeks later, the Dominion's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system once again. This time, Admiral Kexithara felt less confident but more curious. He was here not as a conqueror but as a student. Admiral Chen's voice greeted them immediately. Welcome back, Admiral Kexithara. I trust your government found our proposal acceptable? They did, Admiral Chen. I've been appointed as the Empire's cultural exchange representative. Excellent. I look forward to showing you around our system. I think you'll find human civilization quite interesting. As his ship moved through the solar system, Kexithera marveled at what he saw. Massive space habitats orbited every planet. Asteroid mining operations stretched across the entire belt between Mars and Jupiter. Ships moved in constant streams between worlds, carrying goods and passengers in quantities that dwarfed Imperial commerce. Admiral Chen, he said over the communication channel, how many people live in this system? About 12 billion at last count. We've been working on expanding our orbital habitats to accommodate more growth. 12 billion people in a single system. The Empire's capital system had barely 3 billion inhabitants across 4 worlds. And you've achieved this through peaceful expansion? Of course, Admiral. We've found that people are much more productive when they're working toward goals they believe in, rather than serving masters they fear, Admiral. Kexithera looked out at the bustling solar system and realized he was seeing the future. Not just humanity's future, but possibly the Empire's future as well, if they could learn from these remarkable people. Admiral Chen, he said, I think I have a great deal to learn from your civilization. And we have much to learn from yours, Admiral Kexithera. I think this is going to be the beginning of a very interesting friendship. As the Dominion's Edge approached Earth's orbital facilities, Admiral Kexithera smiled for the first time in weeks. He had come to this system expecting to find primitives to conquer. Instead, he had found teachers who might help the Empire become something better than it had ever been before. The student was ready to learn,